My God, she was declared dead, yet the truth is still breathing right before our eyes. Inside the armory at Fort Bragg, a female staff member quietly cleaned a rifle scope, appearing to do nothing more than a routine task. But a Navy SEAL officer froze when he spotted the faintly engraved number, 2,910 meters on her dog tag. That was the legendary distance of a shot that once saved an entire platoon. The records all stated that the sniper who made it had died in Afghanistan 3 years ago. So who exactly was this anonymous woman? If you turn away now, you will miss the truth that could shake the very core of the U.S. military. At Fort Bragg, North Carolina, every morning was the same. The thunder of boots pounding in rhythm against concrete, the heavy steel doors swinging open, and hundreds of soldiers pouring onto the training fields like an army of ants in uniform. But at the far hidden end of the road, where the armory stretched under cold fluorescent lights, that bustle seemed to never reach. That was where Elena Brooks could be found. Elena, 32 years old, existed at Fort Bragg like a shadow. Her military file was so brief it felt barren. Once served in logistics, discharged early after a minor spinal injury, later rehired as a maintenance technician. No achievements, no medals, nothing that would compel anyone to remember her. If someone opened her personnel folder, the only thought they might have was, "Oh, a quiet woman doing manual work, nothing remarkable." In a base where stories of paratroopers, Delta operators, and special missions were retold like legends, Elena was nothing more than a background figure in a novel. People walked past her without greeting. Some coworkers shrugged, saying, "She was probably washed out. Now they let her clean rifles just to give her something to do." Others sneered, "You don't need tactical smarts for that job." Elena heard it all, yet never argued. She only lowered her head, pulled on her rubber gloves, and kept polishing each rifle until it gleamed. At Fort Bragg, weapons maintenance was considered dull work. Every soldier preferred to sling a rifle on the range, rather than sit for hours scraping dust from a barrel. But to Elena, it was a ritual. Every time her fingers touched cold steel, she moved with rare precision. One drop of excess oil, one faint scratch, none escaped her eyes. Though she was only a logistics employee, she treated every weapon as if she herself might carry it into battle. The curious thing was, Elena never complained. No one heard her grumble about workload, nor did anyone see her argue in the mess hall. Amid the loud conversations about football, weekend drinking, or upcoming deployments, Elena always chose the farthest corner table, eating her sandwich and sipping her black coffee in silence. Someone once joked that if she disappeared for a day, nobody would notice. The joke faded quickly, but Elena heard it, and she merely gave a thin smile, as if long accustomed to being invisible. Her silence unsettled many. In an environment where the roar of hoo-ah and the bond of brotherhood defined everything, a quiet woman lingering at the margins seemed out of place. At unit parties, when everyone raised their glasses to celebrate triumphs, Elena always excused herself early. The reason was simple: "I've got work at the armory." And indeed, she would return there, though nothing urgent awaited. She simply sat, polishing a rifle that wasn't even dirty, as if seeking solace in the monotony. At times, her silence created unexpected humor. Once, during an inspection, a young officer snapped, "Brooks, how the hell do you polish a rifle this shiny?" "It's brighter than my Jeep after a car wash." Elena only shrugged and quietly replied, "Maybe a rifle should shine more than a Jeep." The whole room burst into laughter, while the officer blushed red. That rare moment revealed that Elena was not entirely cold. She simply knew how to hide her laughter until the right time. Her world was that simple. Day after day, cleaning rifles, checking scopes, stacking magazines. Each movement repeated endlessly. To most it was drudgery. But to her, it was a way to keep her mind steady. A way to survive in a place where the glory of heroes always shone bright, while she chose to remain in the shadows. And yet, within that quiet shadow, one small detail began to draw attention, a number faintly engraved on the worn dog tag beneath her collar. And it was not something anyone could easily overlook. If you leave this story now, you'll miss the secret that shook all of Fort Bragg. Do you dare continue to uncover it? All right, my dear viewers, take a few seconds to like this video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly resonate with what I'm sharing, and leave a comment below to tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see people joining us from all over the world. That morning, Fort Bragg buzzed with its usual commotion, but inside the armory, an unusual silence lingered. A SEAL team from Virginia Beach had arrived to conduct a routine equipment inspection. For most technicians, it was just another day under the scrutinizing eyes of notoriously exacting men. But for Elena Brooks, that morning would become a turning point. Leading the inspection team was Lieutenant Mark Davidson, an officer hardened by 2 brutal tours in Iraq. His face carried the etched lines of the desert, his voice was low and steady, and his gaze seemed to pierce through the outer shells of anyone it landed on. When Davidson stepped into the armory, the atmosphere tightened. Elena kept her head down, her gloved hands sliding along the frame of an M2010 rifle, wiping away the fine dust left from the last training session. Davidson observed. He had seen hundreds of technicians clean weapons, but never anyone who worked with such effortless natural precision. Elena's movements weren't just maintenance. They were the fluid motions of someone who had once gripped this weapon in situations where a single second's delay could cost lives. Every tilt of her head, every light touch on the bolt assembly was so exact he couldn't look away. Then Davidson's eyes fell on the dog tag hanging beneath her protective collar. A piece of scratched, tarnished metal, etched with faint numbers. 2,910 meter. In that instant, Davidson's blood ran cold. It was unmistakable. That number wasn't decorative, it was symbolic. It marked a single shot in the history of the United States Marine Corps, a shot that saved an entire unit from an ambush in Kunar, Afghanistan. The one who pulled the trigger was Sergeant First Class Maya Hale, codenamed Ghost 12, and according to every classified report, Ghost 12 had died 3 years ago. Her observation post had been overrun by Taliban fighters. Her body was never recovered. Elena raised her head and met Davidson's eyes. For a fleeting moment, her gaze sharpened with an icy glint, not the look of a maintenance worker, but the stare of a sniper who had once read the wind, calculated ballistics, and struck a target from over 2 kilometers away. Davidson flinched before quickly masking it, lowering his eyes to his clipboard. But his heart pounded. The whispers from coworkers about the nameless girl who cleans rifles suddenly meant nothing. This woman might be a buried legend. But why was she here, hidden under such an unremarkable identity? He kept watching quietly. When Elena inspected the rifle's barrel, her fingers instinctively avoided surfaces that could affect accuracy, a habit only a seasoned marksman would know. When she adjusted a scope, the motion was so quick and precise that even the SEALs nearby frowned slightly, sensing something different. There was even a nearly comical moment when a young soldier deliberately dropped a magazine, hoping to fluster her. Maybe he wanted to tease the quiet woman. But instead of startling, Elena simply shifted aside. Her movement so smooth that by the time the magazine hit the ground, she had already bent down, picked it up, and set it neatly back in place, as if it were just another part of the procedure. The calm efficiency unsettled the soldier, drawing laughter from his teammates. Davidson didn't laugh. He knew such reflexes didn't come from ordinary staff. Under the cold, fluorescent glow, Elena continued her work, but the air in the armory had changed. A subtle tension spread, as though everyone was waiting for something to be revealed. Davidson couldn't shake the sense that he was standing in front of a secret far larger than any report he had ever read. If Elena truly was Ghost 12, It meant the military had built an empty grave for someone still alive. It meant what he was witnessing wasn't just a clerical error, but a truth that could shake the entire special operations community. What about you? If you discovered that someone declared Kia was alive right before your eyes, would you stay silent or step into that secret? The air inside the armory that day was thick, heavy, as though even the dust motes were waiting for an unexpected detonation. Lieutenant Mark Davidson had watched long enough, had studied every detail too precise to be mistaken. At last, he stepped closer to Elena Brooks. He chose a corner of the armory where the hum of the ventilation fan drowned out other conversations. With the blunt directness of a special operations officer, Davidson's voice came low. Ever taken a shot at 2,910 meters? Elena froze. Her gloved hands still rested on the rifle's frame, but they were locked rigid by the weight of that question. This wasn't teasing. It couldn't be a joke. That number was the one etched into her dog tag, the number tied to a single shot 3 years earlier in Afghanistan. In an instant, memory surged back like a desert wind. The shrouded peaks of Kunar, the gunfire echoing through ravines, teammates trapped in a siege, and the impossible shot that saved an entire unit. Then came the flood of enemies, the observation post, overrun, stone stained with blood. Shemaiah Hale, Ghost 12, had died there, at least in the world's eyes. Elena raised her head, locking eyes with Davidson. His weren't the eyes of idle curiosity. They were the eyes of a man who had seen truth lurking in shadow. She knew she couldn't outright deny it. But she couldn't openly admit it either. Her voice dropped, half confirmation, half deflection. If there were someone like that, they'd be dead by now. A fragile mask cracked. The words held just enough distance to deflect, yet enough weight to confirm. Davidson pressed no further. For him, it was more than enough. He drew in a deep breath, set his clipboard on the table, and gave the brief nod of a soldier recognizing a hidden comrade among hundreds of strangers. After a pause, Davidson spoke words that sent a faint tremor through Elena's chest. If you still have that skill, there's a mission that will need you. But I need proof. She looked at him, eyes flickering with the shadow of a smile. Proof? How does a ghost prove itself? And yet, the thought dissolved quickly. She knew Davidson meant it. And strangely, she realized she wanted it too. 3 years of hiding, 3 years of quietly cleaning rifles for others, had left a crushing emptiness inside her. The idea of returning to the range was both terrifying and intoxicating. Like someone who had quit smoking but felt the craving ignite with every trace of smoke. Maya Hale had died, but within Elena Brooks, Ghost 12 still lived, waiting for a chance to breathe. She exhaled softly, setting the M2010 down on the table, a quiet gesture of acceptance. No words were needed. Davidson understood. In her eyes he saw the blend of resolve and caution, the exact qualities every report about Ghost 12 had once recorded. From across the room, a young soldier stole a glance, puzzled that a single question could change the entire atmosphere. He muttered, "Guess the lieutenant's just checking maintenance procedures." No one answered. If they knew the truth, the whole base would quake. The tension was so sharp that even a sneeze might have shattered it. But instead, Davidson let out a short, ironic laugh. Seems you can't hide the look of someone who's peered through a scope at nearly 3 clicks. Elena didn't answer. She only shrugged, a gesture that both admitted he was right and insisted on her silence. In Davidson's mind, the plan was already forming. A private test, off the record, no paperwork, no files, at a range, outside the base. If Elena truly was Ghost 12, he would know instantly. And if not, it would remain nothing more than a strange coincidence. But he already knew this was no coincidence. Elena returned to her cleaning, but her hands trembled slightly, Not from fear, but from anticipation. A part of her had just awakened after 3 years of slumber, and that part would not be silenced easily. Would someone officially declared dead be willing to step back into the battlefield, where every shot could alter history? Dear viewers, take a sip of water and stay with us, because the story is only getting more unexpected from here. Comment 1 if you think this story is gripping, so we know you're still here with us. The following afternoon, the sky over Fayetteville was draped in a pale sunlight, thin as silk. A private shooting range lay quietly beyond a line of tall pines, far removed from the bustle of Fort Bragg. It was the place Davidson had chosen, discreet, safe, and leaving behind no official record. He brought with him an M2010 rifle, tuned to perfection. The weapon gleamed with fresh oil, the scope aligned with meticulous care, the cartridge carrying rounds that still carried the scent of new gunpowder. Elena arrived in a plain shirt and worn jeans. No uniform, no medals, just a woman who seemed ordinary, yet had once been the ghost that sowed fearsome precision across Afghanistan. She lay prone on the sandy ground, shouldering the rifle. Her breathing slowed, her eyes locked through the scope. Davidson stood behind her, his own heartbeat pounding, as if he were the one about to squeeze the trigger. He said nothing, only observed every subtle detail, the way she adjusted the stock, the tilt of her chin against the cheek rest. These movements were not those of a weapons cleaner. The first shot cracked at 800 meters. The steel plate quivered. The bullet struck dead center. Davidson nearly forgot to breathe. No drift. No error. It was the perfect opening shot. She didn't pause. The second and the third followed swiftly. At 1,200 meters, the target was a dog tag suspended in front of the plate. The bullet pierced it clean through, the piece of metal ringing like a church bell in the wind. A few soldiers watching from a distance whistled under their breath, while Davidson clenched his fist. He knew now for certain, Ghost 12 didn't just exist, her instincts remained intact. The fifth round, fired at 1,500 meters, landed flush against the red line. The grouping spread no wider than 4 inches of precision few active snipers could match. Each report of the rifle was another hammer driving Davidson's conviction deeper. He tried to remain composed, but his eyes blazed with certainty. Elena lowered the weapon, brushed a layer of dust from the stock, and murmured, "It's been 3 years since I touched one of these. But the skill, it never disappears." In that moment, time seemed to pause. The afternoon light stretched across the distant targets, wind carrying the scent of gunpowder across the range. Elena didn't look at Davidson, she stared toward the horizon. She was no longer the silent armorer in the shadows of the depot. She was Ghost 12 again, the sniper who had once struck fear into the Taliban at Kunar. Davidson drew a deep breath, as though a missing piece of a puzzle had finally fallen into place. He knew that if exposed, this revelation could send shockwaves through Washington. But if kept secret, it could save dozens of lives on missions yet to come. A light laugh carried from the group of young soldiers nearby, shattering the charged silence. "She makes it look like a video game," one blurted. Elena heard it, and the corner of her mouth curled into a wry smile. A flicker of humor, just enough to remind everyone that for her, distances others called impossible were little more than a training exercise. Davidson didn't laugh. He only nodded, his gaze filled with equal parts respect and unease. He knew he had just opened a door that could return Ghost 12 to the battlefield, but could also drag her into the vortex of danger, where the name Elena Brooks would no longer shield her. In the fading light, Elena rose, brushed the dust from her knees, and looked out at the faraway targets. Her eyes shone with the fierce light she had buried for 3 years. The proof was undeniable now. There could be no more doubt. Ghost 12 was alive, and the skill had never left her. When a legend thought dead rises again among the living, can she truly remain hidden forever, or will she be drawn back to where the sound of gunfire calls her name? The news cut through the silence like a knife. An American diplomatic officer had been taken hostage in Mogadishu. The location was confirmed a fortified compound in the outskirts, surrounded by nearly 20 armed men. Intelligence was clear. At the first sign of a direct assault, the hostage would be executed on the spot. This was no longer a standard mission, but a life-or-death gamble. In the small briefing room, fluorescent light reflected off Davidson's tense face as he laid out the situation. There was no time for safe choices. They needed an overwatch position from afar, a ghost in the dark, who could dismantle an entire perimeter defense in under 60 seconds. The mission demanded absolute precision, absolute discipline, and the kind of resolve forged only in battle. Elena sat silently. The name Maya Hale had died in Kunar, but the truth was that Ghost 12 still existed, listening, calculating. Inside her, the old memories surged back: the gunfire, the faces of teammates who had fallen because of a decision she couldn't save them from. This chance was not merely another mission. It was a way to atone, to pay the debt that had weighed on her for 3 long years. Her condition was clear. Her current identity must remain absolutely protected. If Ghost 12 returned, she would exist only in the shadows, no reports, no records, no acknowledgement beyond those who needed to know. Davidson nodded. They both understood. Legends could only survive as phantoms, and that was the best way they could continue to serve. 72 hours later, the sky over Somalia was swallowed in heavy darkness. A transport helicopter dropped her onto a rocky ridge, more than 2 kilometers from the target. There was no light, only the desert wind and faint slivers of moon. Elena, or rather, Ghost 12, lay flat, body pressed against the ground, hands sliding along the stock of the perfectly tuned M2010. Her breathing slowed, eyes pressed into the scope. Through the glass, every detail sharpened with uncanny clarity. Guards shifting on the rooftop, the ember of a cigarette glowing in the night, a rifle slung carelessly over a shoulder. Each figure was no longer a shadow, but a point that had to vanish to clear a path for the life trapped inside. Her heartbeat fell into that strange, familiar rhythm, not nervousness, but the cadence she had carried for years. Calm in chaos. Focus when everything else was only distant echoes. In her earpiece, Davidson's voice came soft and steady. Team in position. Overwatch report. Elena flicked the switch, her voice low, resolute. Overwatch ready. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The dry crack of gunfire split the night, a sequence so clean it seemed like rhythm. Guard Alpha collapsed before he could even turn his head. Bravo, Charlie, Delta, each target disappeared through her scope. No screams, no return fire. Only the hiss of bullets in the dark and the thud of bodies hitting sand. The last shot. Guard Juliet turned away. Cigarette glowing at his lips, dropped silently, the ember tumbling bright into the dust. 8 rounds. 8 targets. In under a minute, the perimeter melted away, as if it had never existed. From afar, Davidson signaled. The SEAL team surged forward, cutting wire, storming the compound. The thunder of flashbangs, boots pounding, then a voice shouted, urgent and clear, hostage secure. A beat later, the comms confirmed extraction. Elena didn't smile. She didn't sigh in relief. She kept her eyes in the scope, sweeping for stragglers. For her, a mission was complete only when the helicopter lifted safely from the danger zone. Only when the blades finally roared into the distance did she let her fingers slip from the trigger. A hard gust swept across the ridge, peeling sand from the rifle's stock. In the dark, Ghost 12 whispered to herself, not for glory, only to keep one American alive. Can a ghost remain hidden forever in the shadows, or will missions like this force her into the light? The flight back to North Carolina unfolded in rare silence. There were no cheers, no applause, no celebratory ceremony as one might imagine after a successful mission. Inside the aircraft there was only the smell of engine oil, the steady hum of turbines, and the quiet gazes that kept drifting toward the woman seated in the back row. Davidson, a man of few words, offered only a short remark. "Outstanding work, Ghost 12. Elena turned, a fleeting smile brushing her lips. Light as a whisper of wind. "Here, I'm just Elena Brooks. No reports, no medals, no photographs taken, no name entered into the mission log. To the world, Ghost 12 still lay buried on the ridges of Kunar. But for those aboard that flight, the truth was different. They had witnessed a legend step out from the shadows." Back at Fort Bragg, Elena returned to her familiar station, the workbench tucked away in the armory's corner. Everything seemed the same. Rifles lined up in rows, the cold flicker of fluorescent light, the routine shifts that never changed. Only one thing was different: the way people looked at her. Before Somalia, most walked past without a glance. To them, Elena was just the gun-cleaning girl, doing the work no one else wanted. But after the mission, in the eyes of Davidson and a handful of operators, there was now a silence of respect. They never spoke of it, for no one was allowed to. Yet when Elena bent over to polish a scope, their eyes carried a recognition she had not seen in 3 years. It didn't make her proud. If anything, it unsettled her. Elena was accustomed to being invisible, used to playing the role of the spare shadow in a base glittering with the glory of paratroopers and Delta operators. But now, when she entered a room, she could feel the shift. A young officer would stand up, offering his seat. A SEAL petty officer would nod, not the casual nod of courtesy, but the kind reserved for those whose worth is undeniable. Sometimes the change bordered on humor. One morning, Rodriguez, her direct supervisor, inspected an M4 she had just finished cleaning. Normally expressionless, he squinted at the rifle, then muttered dryly, "Brooks, if you keep polishing these this clean, I might just start using them as mirrors instead of the bathroom." The whole room burst out laughing. Elena laughed too, a real laugh, the first in years. But not everyone was comfortable with the shift. Whispers trailed behind her, speculation filling the gaps left by secrecy. They didn't know the truth. They only sensed something different about the silent woman. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed Elena had once been combat. Others whispered she had friends in the Pentagon. The truth remained buried, and that only made the stories multiply. Elena didn't care. She continued her steady routine, wiping down each rifle, checking every barrel, logging each technical detail. To others, the work looked monotonous, the life of a ghost. To her, it was the perfect cover. She knew Ghost 12 could only survive in shadow if Elena Brooks remained the unremarkable girl with the rags and oil. At night, when the base fell silent, Elena often sat alone on the balcony of the barracks, a cold cup of coffee in her hand. Her gaze wandered toward the pine forest. Sometimes, the chirring of insects carried her back to Afghanistan, to the outpost wiped out in the night. She remembered the teammates who never returned, and reminded herself that every mission now was not just to save the living, but to keep their memory alive. In Washington, the news was a brief headline: American hostage rescued in special operations raid. No details, no names, no mention of the shots that had rewritten the outcome. Americans rejoiced, but no one knew of the woman who lay motionless in the dark, breath steady, pulling a trigger with near-inhuman precision. Recognition came in the quietest form. One afternoon, Davidson stopped by the armory. He didn't say much. He simply placed a small wooden box on Elena's table. Inside was a blank dog tag, no name, no numbers. He gave a single nod, his eyes speaking where words could not. It wasn't a medal. It was a reminder. She still existed, though under another name. Elena closed the box and tucked it into her locker. She needed no more symbols. What she had regained was enough. The chance to serve not for glory, but for the lives waiting in the shadows. The greatest change was not found in public ceremonies, but in the way people looked at her. To a few operators, Elena was no longer the silent girl polishing guns. In their eyes, she was a teammate, an irreplaceable part of missions history would never record. How much longer before the shadows are no longer enough to conceal Ghost 12? The story of Ghost 12, Elena Brooks, reminds us that sometimes the greatest heroes choose to live in the shadows. Not because they are weak, but because they understand that true value does not lie in medals or praise, but in every life saved and the peace they quietly preserve for others. Perhaps within each of us, there exists a part like Elena, a part that is silent, unnoticed, yet carries the strength to make a change when the moment calls. And sometimes what is most needed is not stepping into the spotlight for applause, but standing firm, holding on to faith, and acting at the right time, even when no one is watching. If this story has touched your heart, let us know where you are watching from, and share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to share this video so that many other Americans can also feel the power of quiet determination. And be sure to subscribe to our channel to continue journeying with stories of inspiration, where even the shadows can become light.